All right. Clap one on three. One, two, three. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of True Crime and Cocktails. We're so glad that you're here. As always, I am your host, Lauren Ash, and as always, I am joined by my co-hostess with the mostess, Christy Oxborrow. How you feeling?
Great.
Fantastic.
Jazzed to be here.
I am also jazzed. I am also jazzed. I am also jazzed. Come on.
Couldn't be happier.
From the soundtrack for True Crime and Cocktails. It would be amazing if I put out a soundtrack album that's just the bullshit songs that I improvise on here, you know?
I think you're going to regret having said it out loud.
First track, Christy, she is a science nerd.
Of course. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. With a remix like 10 songs later.
There's actually 6 versions of Christy, she's a science nerd on the True Crime and Cocktails soundtrack album.
You're
for
right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Fewer. No fewer.
Couldn't be.
No, couldn't be.
Couldn't be.
Now listen, I'm gonna get right into it.
Yeah.
There is an update that we need to get.
Sure.
Because on the last episode, previously on True Crime and Cocktails, that's how it works.
Beautiful.
We were talking about Pride and
Primal
Prejudice.
Fear.
Also Primal Fear.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes. Did you watch Primal Fear?
I did not. I didn't have time.
No, that was not what I felt like
we discussed. You're right.
We discussed, well, of course, we were talking Primal Fear, but we were also talking Pride and Prejudice. And I was specifically bringing up the miniseries versus the more recent film. And
Correct.
for some reason, I shoehorned you into watching it, watching both, and comparing and contrasting.
Correct.
And I'm assuming that you've probably understood the assignment and did the assignment.
Unfortunately, I took it too far.
And that, dear listeners, is why you're all here. It's why you came. It's why you stayed. She takes things a little too far.
Yeah, I'm not kidding. 4 full pages.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Again.
Well,
stop me anytime.
Let me start taking my notes. Here we go.
I am aware there is Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies. I did not do that. I almost did an episode of Wishbone that was about Pride and Prejudice, just as like a laugh. And then I was like, no, I've done so much work. I can't do more. Also, dear Caitlin pointed out to me, Netflix is coming out with a Pride and Prejudice miniseries.
Interesting.
In the future.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you right now, no. I'm Pride and Prejudiced it out, I think. So fair. Again, though, I did it in less than 24 hours. So it just is what it is. Not that it's that long, but still. Anyhow. So I'm going to give a warning that there's probably spoilers to the whole idea of Pride and Prejudice as a story, but the two of them are 20 and 30 years old. So I'm not going to feel bad about causing spoilers to what was in each of them. So first I watched the movie from 2005. I have just a couple of thoughts. Very, very little, and then I'll have a few thoughts about the miniseries, and then we get to the true heart of my homework.
Fantastic.
So my very first thought right out the gate, which I said out loud alone. Birds chirping in a country meadow as the sun rises, followed by a light piano tinkling. They're trying to sweep me off my feet.
Out of the gate.
Out of the gate.
Out of the damn gate.
Out of the gate. The moment that Mr. Darcy says that Elizabeth is not handsome enough to tempt him, get fucked, Darcy. Yeah. Keeping in mind, I know nothing about Pride and Prejudice going into this. And then, like, you're going to be like, is that it? But overall for the movie, it just made me care more about Jane and Mr. Bingley. I don't know why, but I just for some reason, I was more invested in their love story. Um, but again, we'll get into more about the movie. But the miniseries from 1995, again, some thoughts. Um, some of these will only make sense to people who have seen it or know the basic story. Some will make sense to no one.
Yeah.
This is just how this works. I don't edit this. Again, I wanted to write down my first thought that I, again, alone to myself, I said out loud, "Oh, horses." Very authentic for the time period.
Yeah, better than, I guess, motor cars. You're right.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh god, this is incredible.
I mean, I think it was at that moment that I went, "Were there any horses in the first?" I just felt like I I did go back and skip through the movie a bit, and I was like, "Is there a horse?" There are. They're just not very prominent
Mm,
compared to, what they were in the miniseries, but the miniseries had the fucking time to put horses in there,
right.
so it is what it is. Um, Colin Firth being broody is ideal. Uh, Again, these are just random thoughts. 34 minutes in, and Mr. Darcy is already telling someone that he's in love with Elizabeth. In the movie, he bears the pain of longing in silence. Eat your heart out, Jane. Uh, no, no.
Incredible.
Um, I know it was a different time, but Mr. Collins trying to court the Bennets, even though they're his cousins, is unsettling, and I couldn't get past it.
Mhm.
Um, Along the said lines of, I know it was a different time, the patriarchy of the entire like inheritance deal, where if a man dies, his property has to go to a male relative because women aren't allowed. Just get the fuck out. Not that they're trying to go back to that, but anyhow,
No, somewhat.
Charlotte, you could do better. Yeah. This one is specifically for you, Lauren.
Yeah.
Dawn from the UK office is in this.
Oh,
Don't ask me who she played.
doesn't matter.
Wasn't one of the sisters.
Okay.
She was a friend of somebody's.
She must have been quite young.
She was.
Yeah.
Baby face. Oh God, what do we got? I wish they'd go a little darker on Colin Firth's eye makeup. I want him broody and emo.
Mhm. Mhm.
I want him Harry Headbanger from Mamma Mia when they do like the moment back in time where they show him young and all they did was give him like a wig and eyeliner. That's what I want. Apparently that really stuck with me.
This is very
Um
specific.
yeah, well, speaking of specific, but also just what the fuck, Chrissy? Mr. Bingley. You fucking idiot. Do not let Darcy keep you from the woman you love. That pissed me off twice. I'll tell you that. So Elizabeth and Darcy staring across the room at each other, eyes sparkling, everything else just fading away. I get it. It's very swoony. And I get it. Yeah, I get why people are into this. Um, Also, so many atrocious hats. Speaking of so many catty bitches. I'm looking at you, Miss Bingley. Darcy will never love you or your permanent scowl, so sit down.
This is incredible.
This is what you get, folks. Um, so Elizabeth is crying. Darcy sees her. He says she looks unwell, and then he immediately offers her wine. I'm charmed. I'm absolutely charmed. Um, Lydia. Lydia. He was using you. You wretched, wretched girl. Bragging about your piece of shit husband is proof that you are a spoiled brat and absolutely still a child. Only got angry about Lydia in this one, not in the movie.
Got it.
Um Did Darcy's top hat get taller over the course of these episodes, or are my eyes just getting tired? It's been 5 hours now. I get it. The miniseries needed the time to build the love between their leads. Seeing Miss Bingley scowl at the wedding, chef's kiss. Colin Firth wistfully leaning in a window while brooding is why this has an 8.8 out of 10. Which leads me to a list. There's always a list.
Of course.
Of the times throughout the last 5+ hours of my life when Colin Firth's appeal increased for me as a woman.
I like this.
When he dove into the water, it was a lake or a pond, I'm not too sure. When he was fencing, when he was riding a horse, when he was using a walking stick, every single time he bowed to a woman, when he was carrying a candlestick in the dark, when he was brooding over a fireplace, when he was showing genuine concern for a woman, when he was offering a woman wine simply because she seemed sad, when he was forcing a dirty scoundrel to marry the young girl that the scoundrel was just using, when he had to duck to get through a doorway because his top hat was too tall. And of course, when he was wearing a top hat. Also, I have no reason for this statement, but the movie made me want to read the book, and the miniseries made me decide against it.
Mm.
I don't know why that is, but it just is what it is. So, finally, the specific work that you asked for, the comparison points. Um, this is how seriously I took this. I believe there are 12 points that I
Wow.
will use to compare the two media. Number 1, length. The movie was 2 hours, 6 minutes. The miniseries was 5 hours, 10 minutes. Point goes to the movie. Number 2. God, I'm an idiot. Cinematography and overall visuals. The movie, sweeping landscapes, beautiful use of light and dark and camera movement to convey emotion. Miniseries, some lovely scenes, but mostly so bright it was almost washed out. Point movie.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Number 3, the dance scenes. There were many. Always a ball, always a party. The movie, they were slightly crowded, but it looked like everyone there was genuinely having a good time. The miniseries, God, it seemed dull and so empty for such a prestigious affair. Point movie.
Oh my God, this is wild.
Number 4, adequate use of animals. The movie, barely enough horses. I forgot that they actually attempted to put horses in. Miniseries, so many horses, almost constant horses. Point miniseries, apparently. I guess I'm a horse girl. It is what it is. Number 5, costumes. I'm saying it right out the gate. Absolutely point to the movie because in the miniseries, it mostly looked like they were wearing nightgowns. I'm so sorry. It's just it is what it is. 6, the cast. Now, granted, most of the cast for the miniseries are Brits that I'm not familiar with, but the recognizability of the movie cast cannot be understated. Keira Knightley, Rosamund Pike, Carey Mulligan, Jenna Malone, Donald Sutherland, Tom Hollander, Kelly Riley, aka Beth Dutton from Yellowstone, Penelope Wilton, aka Barbara from Shaun of the Dead, and Dame Judy Dench. Point movie. Number 7, chemistry of the leads. Movie We had Keira Knightley and Matthew McFadden. They were okay. Miniseries, Jennifer L. and Colin Firth. They were dreamy point miniseries.
Mm.
Fun fact, I don't know how to make a list without fun facts. Jennifer and Colin were reunited in the 2005 movie King's Speech.
Ah.
There you go. Number 8, the Bennett sisters. So much bickering. They got along so much better in the movie because I watched the movie first. In the movie, I'm like, God, they all love each other. In the miniseries, I'm like, they did not. So point movie. Lydia Bennett is exhausting in the miniseries. In the movie, you don't even know she exists until she runs away. So point movie. Number 9, the Bennett parents. Oh, Mrs. Bennett is overbearing in the movie. I assume that's just what the character is in the book. But oh my God, is she absolutely insufferable in the miniseries. But at this point, I was one episode in, but I still gave the movie a point for it. Mrs. Bennett manages to get even more insufferable by the end of the second episode, and apparently increasingly throughout the series, so another point for the movie. Number 10, rewatchability. The miniseries, I'll say it, it is too damn long. And if I ever see Mrs. Bennett again, I will throw something at the TV. So point to the movie. Number 11, emotions that the media conjured in me as a first-time viewer. The movie? He told her, and I quote, "You have bewitched me, body and soul." Hot. The miniseries, he very quickly told a confidant that he had interest in Elizabeth. Point miniseries. He was not a man who showed emotion, but he was willing to be like, I care for her. Number 12, overall enjoyment. While it is a lot longer, the miniseries has time to build emotions and make you care about the characters or despise them in some cases. I'm looking at you, Mrs. Bennett. The movie was okay. So for overall enjoyment, I have to give it to the miniseries, but I'll honestly probably never watch it again. Please note, I didn't bother giving points for music because I felt overall they were both pretty on the even keel.
Right.
So, in conclusion, while I felt that I enjoyed my time throughout the miniseries more, with an official score of 10-4, the 2005 movie comes out on top, mathematically speaking. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Wowzer. Listen,
Yeah.
I feel bad because I feel like I really pushed that it was like there's no way the miniseries is not going to be better than the
Mm.
movie. There's no way the movie could be better. Well, shame on me. Shame on me.
Oh, no. Look, I like a project. I like to be useful. The idea that it's like, when you're like, do you need to take these and compare them? All I heard was, you want to make a list? Like, that's all I heard. And the idea that it was like, I just have to consume these two things. Great, done. Um, yeah, and look, maybe I shouldn't have done them. But like
No.
I as quickly as I did. Maybe I should have spaced it out. But I did wake up. I watched the movie Saturday night, and then I watched the documentary for the for this episode. And then the next morning I woke up and immediately started the mini series and only took a break 3.5 hours in to start making fajitas, and then got back to it and watched the remaining like 2 hours. It
Right.
was a lot. It was a lot. And then I started binging Bridgerton after that.
How far into Bridgerton are you now?
I'm almost done season 2.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I have a lot of thoughts on those, but I was going to save those for Patreon.
Of course. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I'm impressed. I of course never intended when I gave you this challenge. I never
Yeah,
intended for this to be, 4 pages, to be
of
so time
course.
consuming. That was never my intention. But I'm glad that it gave you the enjoyment of writing the list.
Of course. And look, again, the mini series wasn't bad. I was shocked at how often during it I would be like, huh, I'm 3 hours in. Like I didn't realize I'd just spent the last 3 hours doing this. But Mrs. Bennet, like I don't think I can fully convey how over the top she was. And just like watching them, I'm glad I watched the movie first
Hmm.
because I was like, okay, so that's what she's supposed to be like. And then when I watched the miniseries, I was like, I can't stand her.
Right.
I can't stand her. It was just everything was, oh, and she was like, I'm gonna faint. And I just can't. It was, and I was like, I can't read a book about this character with this character in it. I would go crazy.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah,
Listen,
look,
I'm not going to say that the next part of this is like, well, I mean, I guess you wouldn't really know how she was intended unless you read the book. I'm not saying that to you. I don't want you to read the book. I'm not asking you to do it. I'm not implying you should do it. It was just a bit.
have I considered
I know.
is my next comparison courtroom dramas? I don't have the time. It's just also so funny that I was like, well, I often say like, oh, I have to watch that for work, which
Hmm.
it'll be some sort of documentary. But this time, anytime my child would come out and see me watching more hours of Pride and Prejudice, he's like, "What are you doing?" And I just went, "Oh, I'm watching this for work." And then realized, "Oh shit, I actually have something I have to watch for work." Um, but I like a project. I like
Yeah.
to. I'm glad I've consumed them both because now I know.
Now you know.
I also didn't know I cared that much about horses. I didn't think I had a strong opinion either way. I thought I was just like horses exist and that's that. But the amount of times I saw horses in that mini series, I was like, was there a single horse in the movie? There was, but I think they just didn't want everybody to have to learn how to ride a horse.
Right. Right.
I don't know.
Which to me feels like they're cheaping out a little bit.
I'm curious how long it took them to film that mini series.
Mm,
And how long did everyone get to ride horses in advance?
right. Well, when I shot Paul Blart Mall Cop 2, thank you and you're welcome. Um, I did claim to have horseback riding experience, which we've talked about this on the show, I think, before, but I did. I mean, as a youth,
Right.
I'm comfortable on a horse. I wasn't lying. But they gave me one lesson. One.
Sure.
But that was also I only had one day on the horse to film, so feels like that could be reasonable, I guess.
I mean, I think I can speak for all of us when I say it looked like you had several days experience on a horse.
Well, I am legitimately comfortable on a horse. That is true. That's not I was not putting that on just to try and book the part.
Sure.
I like being on a horse. I enjoy it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't I mean, look, am I going to add petting a horse to my like I don't want to call it a bucket list, but to like my happy life to-do list? I don't know.
Happy
Maybe.
life to-do list.
Well, there are things like someday I'd like to pet a tamed duck.
Right.
Because I'm
Right.
not going to obviously approach one in the wild
No, that's
in
not
that way.
wise.
But like the ones where like they live on farms and like people pick them up all the time, I don't need to pick it up. I actually probably would prefer not to because I don't want to hurt it. I just want to pet one.
Hmm.
And then it's like I could pet a horse.
Oh, yeah.
I would be okay with that. And so I'll add that to the list. But
I can't believe you've never pet a horse.
I mean, I've had a I've taken a child to a fair and they've ridden a horse and I've had to walk alongside for safety. But I don't think I pet it. I did ride an elephant once at the circus when I was like 8 or 9. I did not want to do it. It
Mm,
was just all the kids were doing it, so I was shoved in line
mhm,
and I was terrified because every step it took, it rocked me back and forth in that it there was just like a metal square on top of its body and I was put in that square and told to hold on, but every step it would like rock. I did not enjoy that time. I was very stressed out. So unfortunately, I didn't take the chance to pet it. And
and
so I
listen,
can't
that
add that because I know it probably will never happen.
that was also, at a time where I'm sure the elephant didn't enjoy it either. We
Oh,
know
I
more now.
guarantee it didn't.
We know more now than we did then.
Yeah.
We
Oh,
we don't do
yeah.
that anymore.
We can't get into 80s parking lot circuses.
No. No, I can't. It'll break my heart.
Yeah. I got
It'll
a
break my
cotton
heart.
candy that night.
That's fun. Did I ever tell you about when there was we called it the Carnival because there was a carnival that popped up in the mall parking lot.
That's clever.
No animals. Uh, but I was ready to go on these carnival rides and I went on the zipper and I did throw up. And I had not eaten most of the day because I knew I was going to get barfy. So all I'd had was water and
Mhm.
I absolutely threw up water all over me. I got off. One of the very cool girls from my high school was down below and she looked angry. And I said, "What's going on?" She was like, "Some asshole just spit on me off of that ride." I immediately knew it was me. And by the way, here's the thing, it wasn't spit, it was water vomit. And I was like, "Oh no." And she's like, "Yeah, I'm going to kick their ass. If I figure out who it is, I'm going to kick their ass." And I said, "Oh, I hope you find them."
Hiding in plain sight.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
I had to hide in plain sight.
Of course.
What was I
Oh
supposed
my
to
God.
say? "Sorry, that was me. I actually threw up on you. Sorry." That's no better.
No, no, you don't do that. I also would have expected like oh, you want some help?
Yeah.
I'll help you track them down. How was she gonna track them down?
How would she have figured it out? I don't know. She was just waiting to like get a look at everybody getting off the ride and then she would like just make a moral judgment based on that. Listen,
Here's the joke. You know when she figured it out? When this episode dropped.
yeah,
We're gonna learn.
there's some of my old high school chums that listen to this show and I think she'd
Yeah.
know who it was if she's listening. First of all, I'm so sorry. Please don't
Oh, she
please
has
don't
to know
kick
you didn't do it
please don't kick
intentionally.
my ass now, you
Of
know?
course. Oh, I'd throw
Um
myself between the two of you.
Oh, God bless. But yeah, listen, if she's listening now, listen, I always really liked this person. I had just had a healthy fear of this person was the thing.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, she was always nice to
Sure.
me. She was always nice to me. Again, that's probably because she didn't know that I had accidentally thrown up on her.
Again, you can't help it.
No, that ride is vicious. The zipper
Oh, yeah.
should be outlawed. It's
Is
not
that
good.
the little one that's a weird shape because it's like in the shape of your little body and you're put in
Yeah.
like a cage thing and it like spins you?
And it's a long like this.
Yeah.
And so you're going up like straight up in the air and then you go over and you come straight back down. But as that's happening, your individual car is also spinning.
No, thank you. That's not
Oh
my
God, I almost
style.
threw up just now, just thinking about it.
Did you ever do the Gravitron?
Yep.
My husband uh took our oldest on the Gravitron when he was like, I want to say like 10 or 12.
Hmm.
And they went on this ride. I am not that style. So I was like, no, no, thank you. So I stood off to the side and I waited for them to be done. And when they were done, that child made a beeline for the garbage, threw up for a solid minute, and then looked up and went, "Footlong hot dogs." And I bought him a hot dog. He kept it down, but it's like he had to empty things out to get that hot dog. It's just
Listen,
how fast he rebounded.
of course.
he doesn't like rides. I also feel bad because I know some people who know him listen to this. Don't tease him about it. People get sick on rides all the time.
Did you say which of the children it was?
I said our oldest.
Oh, I missed that. I was going to say if you had just said one of the children, I knew, but
Oh, of course.
yeah.
Well, the thing is, if they're like, oh, and they want to like tease him about it, the joke is, I have a worse story about him and throwing up that I won't tell. So that when he gets mad at me for telling that one, I can be like, well, I didn't tell that one. And he'll go, fair,
Yeah.
and back out.
Listen, you got to know when to hold them. You got to know when to blow chunks.
Oh, yeah, look, it happens. It
Yeah.
happens.
Um, listen, what you drinking over there?
Just the view of little tiny Bean falling asleep.
Well, I'll tell you something.
He's killing me.
I've been debating for the last 3 minutes because she's just farting and farting and farting in my lap. And I'm like, do I need to pause this? Do I need to take her outside to see if she needs to evacuate? Um, yeah. So it looks like she's falling asleep. I don't know whether that's real or if that's her being like, please don't shit myself. Please don't shit myself. I don't know.
I now have a dream
Hmm.
that's dog's inner monologue is like, I can't possibly shit myself. Because isn't that just when they literally go anywhere? Aren't they
Yeah.
just shitting themselves all the
Well,
time?
technically, yes. She feels bad pooping in the house. She does not like it. And so, listen, I think maybe I need to pause and take her out. I'm so
Of course.
sorry.
No, no.
This is real, folks. Absolute chaos. All right. 1, 2, 3. We're back, folks. Nobody wants this update, but I do have a slight funny story. Uh, her stomach is going nuts. It is. Then I thought, is she hungry? Is that why it's making so many noises? She's refusing to eat, so something has upset her belly. Here's the other thing I'll tell you. I was out there just now. I started blowing ass. And here's the truth. I absolutely gave her some chicken that I was like I had ordered some food tonight. One of the things was like a roasted chicken leg. And so now I'm not saying we have food poisoning. I think it's just like something about it's like not sitting for either of us. But she started doing this thing. And I know it's like, let's take go back to zero. Number of days on the podcast, we haven't talked
Course.
about shit. But I won't belabor it, but it's only because it connects to horses. So she started doing this thing where she'll go and find a plant that's about her height, maybe a little bit taller, and she swings her leg over it. One of her rear legs, as though she's like mounting a horse. She swings the leg over and then lets it stay in the air, kind of resting on the top of a plant. And that's when she drops trowel. Like,
Ah,
it's absolutely hysterical. I'm sure it's the funniest thing to see. Again, girl dog, one leg in the air and just letting it go.
of course.
But anyway, that's where we're at. Folks, if we have to pause again, I pray we don't, but just know we're doing our best over here. And it may not be, there may be somebody else, one of the intrepid hosts of this podcast that's swinging her leg over a plant. I don't know. I don't know.
Oh,
Um,
I couldn't swing these legs over anything at this point.
Listen, she William Rikers is what she's doing. She's
Oh
swinging it
my.
over, but then she just keeps it in the air.
I like it. I like the energy.
Ugh,
That's
listen,
big dog energy.
hell yeah. What you drinking over there? That's where we left off.
Oh, was it? My God. I think I took us astray when you asked me. I'm just doing a Pepsi slush with a precarious lid.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want you all to know I've had 2 glasses of Kimmy C, bottles empty, so I've switched to a peach high noon. And this is what I'll say, bottoms up. See you later. Don't know if I'll remember the end of this because as I get more old, see, as I get older, if I have more than 2 drinks,
Hmm.
night night, bye bye. Me
Oh,
no remember so good, you know?
I I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. And I think you need to be nicer to yourself.
God
Let
bless.
yourself have that as a treat. Let that be on your happy life list or whatever the hell I was talking about.
I'm
I
writing
also
down
have to
happy life
find
list.
I have to find more things to put on that list because right now it's quite literally two things. And it's
Pet a duck, pet a horse. Okay.
yeah.
Well, listen, let's get into it. We're talking, of course, The Body Next Door. If you're not familiar, I'll get you up to speed with a synopsis right now. The Body Next Door is a documentary about a body discovered rolled up in plastic in a garden in South Wales in November 2015. Not only did police struggle to determine the identity of the killer, but they also struggled to determine the identity of the victim. At first, investigators believed that the body was fairly recent, but the only person potentially linked to it was a frail older woman who had died weeks before the body was even found. After a breakthrough in the case involving DNA from a single hair, police realized that their initial time frame was way off and that there was far more to the older woman than anyone could ever realize. So, who was this mysterious older woman? Who was the victim? And how did someone manage to get away with murder for so long? Christy Oxborrow investigates.
I'm in shock that I'd never heard of this case until I found the documentary
Mm-hmm.
because it's the kind of thing that I I just can't believe it's been out there in the world. And I mean, I'm sure lots of people have heard of it, but I was surprised. We're all in for a real ride. So disclaimer, this episode will contain very brief mentions of child abuse and suicide, so trigger warning for those who need it. Beatha is a former mining village in South Wales, United Kingdom. It is located about 18 miles northwest of the country's capital of Cardiff, and as of 2021 had a population of just over 7,300. On November 24th, 2015, Rian Lee went to the Tremacum house flats to visit her friend Michelle James. Technically, Rian specifically said she went for a cuppa, which I'm only mentioning because it is easily one of my favorite UK expressions. It literally means having a cup of tea, not coffee, because if it's coffee, they specifically say cup of coffee. From what the internet tells me, please don't. If I'm wrong, it's fine. But cuppa, I'm charmed. I'm so charmed by it. So Rian and Michelle are hanging out. Michelle suggests they pull a prank on someone. Michelle said she knew of a medical skeleton that had been discarded in the garden at the back of the building. The women thought it would be funny to place the skeleton outside of a neighbor's door, ring the bell, and then, surprise them with it or leave it in an empty flat and scare the next people who move in. They went out to the back garden where there is a thick roll of plastic along the wall. They start cutting it open with kitchen knives, but they get a few inches in and they start noticing this dark brown fluid that starts coming out. Michelle freaks out. Um, and she's like, oh my God, I think that's a real body. She told Rian to call the police. The police received the call around 1 p.m. Rian told them that they possibly discovered a body. She was not convinced it was a body, so she thought it was a fake skeleton, maybe some garden waste. So she told the police not to hurry. Police, bless them, hurried anyway. And then the police took over and started cutting through the plastic. And they noticed the dark brown fluid. And once they got about 6 to 8 inches deep into this plastic, they were hit with an overwhelming smell and they could see what appeared to be human hair. The moment police realized that this was actually a real human body, they immediately called for crime scene officers. The body was wrapped in 14 large sheets of plastic. Each sheet was approximately 12 feet across. Using those 14 sheets, the body was wrapped 41 times. Within the layers of plastic, there were bits of carpet, tinfoil, and plastic bags, and it was all wrapped with bungee cords and hundreds of pieces of tape. According to the autopsy, the victim was a white male, middle-aged, approximately 5'6", with receding hair. He was wearing a pair of blue and white striped pajamas. There were fractures to the skull and eye socket, so cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma. Since the organs were still intact and there was no sign of maggots, the medical examiner believed the death was relatively recent. It was estimated that the victim had been dead for anywhere from a few weeks to maybe a couple of months. However, police had no way to identify the victim. His DNA was not found in any database, and there were no dental records for comparison. The medical examiner discovered a serial number from a hip replacement surgery, but they found no matching record. There was also no active missing person reports, no recent disturbance calls to the police, and no sign of anything unusual on nearby security cameras. No weapons were found with the body, or found even anywhere where the body was found. So police were at a loss as to who the victim was or how they came to be in the garden. When Michelle and Rian discovered the body, it was initially Michelle's idea to pull the prank, as she seemed to be the only person who knew that that plastic roll was even there. So Michelle was brought in for an interview. She stated she believed that the plastic roll contained a medical skeleton, the kind you would see in like a doctor's office or a medical school. Michelle said her upstairs neighbor, Lee Sabine, told Michelle that she held on to the skeleton since her days as a nurse in the 1950s. Pronunciation side note. As a Canadian, when I see a last name spelt Sabine, I want to say Sabine, or I want to say Sabine. I'm
Yeah.
saying Sabine because I've tried to train myself this week. I want to say Sabine. In the documentary, everyone, people who this is their last name, UK people, Australia people, all of them, they pronounced it Sabine. So I'm forcing myself to say Sabine because that's just what they all said. So just for anyone who's like, why are you saying it like that? Because that's what the documentary told me to do. Again, I love that I screwed up how I was going to say it because my brain is like, no, it's Sabine. Sure. So Lee Sabine was one of the 4 tenants in this particular set of flats. She had been diagnosed with terminal brain cancer in 2014 and died October 30th, about 3 weeks before the body was discovered. At various points throughout her time living at the Tremacum Flats, Lee mentioned this medical skeleton to friends and neighbors and would often say she needed it moved from her attic. Sometimes she said she needed it moved from the shed. But since Lee was quite frail in the last year of her life, police didn't believe Lee had anything to do with John Doe's death. Then a police constable mentioned that when the body was found, they spoke with Michelle, who, for whatever reason, said that she told another tenant that the body was her ex-husband and she'd been using parts of him to make a stew and had been feeding it to that tenant all week. During her interview, Michelle was asked about that statement, and she said she has absolutely no memory of making it at all.
Right.
That, of course, not the best vibe to have in front of the police. And since there were some inconsistencies in Michelle's statements, including how long she knew about the plastic roll and when she first saw it, police stopped her interview as a witness and then immediately arrested 45-year-old Michelle James for murder. Investigators then asked Michelle the whereabouts of her ex-partner. She said she had a feeling he might be dead because they broke up weeks ago and he hasn't contacted her since. I mean, that's technically usually how breakups happen. But
Yeah.
Then they outright asked Michelle, "Is your ex-partner in that plastic roll?" She said no. Police looked into it. Michelle's ex was a similar height and build to John Doe. Michelle denied any involvement. Police searched Michelle's flat. They found a blood stain on the mattress. The DNA from the stain came back as a match to Michelle's ex, Mike, but it was not a match to the John Doe. Then police found Mike alive and well, living with his mother. So Michelle James was released, but the damage had already been done. Michelle was taunted by locals who often called her a murderer anytime she went anywhere. It got so bad, the local council had to rehouse Michelle in another community. The following year, Michelle was diagnosed with PTSD. So, not only did the police still not know the victim's identity, but now they also didn't have any suspects, not to mention the fact that they prematurely arrested an innocent woman and essentially destroyed her life. The plastic roll was discovered in the back garden of the Tremacum Flats, which could only be accessed through a communal hallway through the building. There was a gate on the other side of the garden, but it was padlocked all the time. So the body would have either been brought through that hallway or the person who put it there had a key to that lock. So then police believed the killer lived in the building. But the building only had 4 flats. The 2 on the ground floor were occupied by Michelle, who had now by this point been exonerated by police, and the other was a 93-year-old woman who rarely went outside. An older man lived in one of the top flats. Not much is known about him. The documentary described him as having vulnerability issues. The 2 older tenants were questioned, but neither recalled ever seeing the plastic roll in the first place. The other flat on the top floor had been empty since the death of Lee Sabine in October 2015. Lee was described as eccentric, flamboyant, and an absolute character. One neighbor said that Lee reminded them of Dame Edna, which, knowing what I know now about Lee, is a massive insult to Edna. Shout out to Barry Humphries and the absolute icon that was Dame Edna. So Lee would talk anyone's ear off if they let her. She particularly liked to talk about her past accomplishments, although those changed depending on who she was talking to. At one point or another, Lee had claimed to be a former supermodel, a famous cabaret singer, a nurse, a drug counselor, and a dog breeder. She also claimed that her ex-husband was a millionaire. He wasn't. She said he cheated on her. To the best of my knowledge, he didn't. And then she claimed he abused her. She went so far as to claim that a woman's charity gave her a new house and she had to start over from nothing. Again, that's not true. And while Lee was willing to share these kind of details, she didn't like to mention anything about her childhood or her family or even where she was originally from. Friends said that they tried to place her accent but could never quite figure it out. Their best guesses were maybe she was from South Africa or New Zealand or Australia, maybe even somewhere in the UK. But they all agreed that Lee's accent sounded fake, like she was purposely putting it on to seem more glamorous or impressive, or maybe to simply hide where she really came from. After Lee's death, her friends were looking for paperwork in Lee's flat when they found 2 passports, one for Lee and another for Lee's husband, John Sabine. Both Lee and John had signed the tenancy agreement when they moved into the Tremacum Flats in February 1997, but no one in the area remembered seeing John. Mary West, who acted as Lee's executor, said that Lee told her John left her for another woman and she hadn't heard from him since. Police wondered if maybe John was the victim in the plastic roll, but Mary did a little sleuthing through public records and she discovered that John Sabine had died in Essex in October 2001 at the age of 72. When police searched Lee's flat, they said it was impossibly clean, as Lee's friends had already gone in to clear it out, as per the instructions in Lee's will. There wasn't much left behind, but inside the garbage, police found a ripped up photo of a man. On the back of the photo, it read, Derek, the man I truly did love. The
Oh,
man turned out to be Derek Ellis, a retired firefighter who briefly lived with Lee. Their relationship was described as volatile. They were often heard screaming at each other. Police considered, well, maybe Derek is the John Doe. But Derek passed away from liver disease in 2010 at the age of 59. After his death, Lee put a tribute to Derek in a local newspaper which read, "Love and peace, my darling." Lee spent the last few weeks of her life in palliative care, and her neighbors and friends noticed that no family ever came to visit. They felt bad that Lee seemed to be alone, so they tried to keep her company. While cleaning out Lee's flat, her friends discovered letters that Lee had written to her children. This came as quite a shock to her friends because Lee had never mentioned children before. At one point, Lee was outright asked by someone if she had children, to which she responded, "God, no."
was her.
There were also no photos of any children in Lee's flat. In fact, one of the only pictures in the flat was an oversized photo of Lee from her cabaret days. I guess she chose to only hang on to photos of people she cared about the most, herself. I know for now people are like, I don't know if she deserves this. She does. So, why did Lee not tell her friends that she was a mother? She knew some of these people for 18 years. How did this topic never come up? Well, likely because Lee wasn't happy about being a parent. And if you needed any indication about her parenting, one of Lee's daughters described Lee as, quote, "a nasty, horrible, heartless bitch."
Wowzer. Wow.
And that's being kind. Lee and her husband, John, were living in New Zealand with their 5 children. In order from oldest to youngest, there was Susan, Stephen, Martin, Jane, and Leanne. In early 1969, Lee and John dropped their children off at a daycare in Auckland. The children were 11, 7, 5, 4, and 2, respectively. Lee told the kids they'd be back in a few days, but they weren't.
Oh, God.
The authorities searched for Lee and John for 18 months, but it was difficult to trace them because they'd sold their house, left the country, and took on new identities.
Mm.
The children were separated and sent to a series of foster homes. They all suffered physical and mental abuse at various times, and the youngest 2 girls, Jane and Leanne, were even subjected to sexual abuse.
Ugh.
And when the girls tried telling an adult what was happening, no one believed them. In 1984, 15 years after abandoning their children, Lee and John returned to New Zealand, contacted their children, and said they wanted to start over with their family.
Mm.
And while things were great for the first 2 weeks, after that, Jane, the second youngest, started demanding answers. Jane, who was about 19 at the time, outright asked why Lee and John had left them in the first place. Lee said, "I don't feel we owe you an explanation."
Oh, boy.
Jane asked again, "Why did you leave?" Lee responded by kicking Jane out of the house. When the youngest, Leanne, questioned why Jane was kicked out, Leanne, who was 17 at the time, also got kicked out. Jane responded by going to the media and bringing the reporters to her parents' house. They locked the door and refused to let Jane in, so she snuck in through a window and unlocked the door for the reporters. This started a massive argument between Lee and Jane, which got physical. Lee then had Jane arrested for assault. Jane then tried to get Lee and John charged with child abandonment, but the older 3 children were angry about it because they believed that Lee and John coming back meant they could finally be a family, something that they had all desperately wanted for the past 15 years. The Minister of Social Welfare in New Zealand launched an investigation into Lee and John's abandoning of their children, but for whatever reason, no charges were ever brought. And maybe that's why the public was so angry at the Sabines, so much so that they were hounded constantly by the press and the public. During one moment, when the press ambushed Lee outside her home, they asked her about her children, and Lee responded, "I am not their mother." She's a real gem. And since the press wouldn't leave them alone, Lee and John decided the only solution was to leave the country because they're cowards. This time, they told their oldest three children that they were going to leave. They told the three kids they're flying to the UK. They have tickets for everybody. Lee and John took the kids to a hotel, said, "We will pick you up here tomorrow at 10 a.m. so we can get on our flight and start our new life." The next morning, 10 a.m. came and went. There was no sign of Lee or
Mm.
John because it turns out they'd actually left the country in the middle of the night. Abandoning the kids once is already so bad. Doing it a second time, it's unforgivable.
Yeah.
Martin, who was the third of the five Sabine children, was particularly devastated by his parents' abrupt departure. During a TV interview, Martin, who was about 20 at the time, said, "It's just good to have your own parents." And he was talking about foster homes and saying that they can never treat you like you're their child.
Right.
He just wanted his parents, which is just heartbreaking.
Mm.
Martin decided to follow his parents to the UK, bringing his girlfriend Jodine with him. It was the last time that Martin's siblings ever saw him alive. Martin, oh, papers falling everywhere. Martin and Jodine, who had been together for about 2 years at this point, lived with Lee and John in a flat in Reading. And according to Jodine, Martin was happy and full of life. He finally had the family he had always wanted. And Lee and John treated him like he was an only child. The majority of the four children left behind turned to drugs and alcohol. Stephen later said he always believed he had done something wrong to make his parents leave, which is heartbreaking. Um, I just don't think that Lee and John ever truly considered the pain that they caused those kids. Maybe they did and they just didn't care, but it feels like they're they were always the number one priority themselves. They didn't care about their children. After about 6 months in Reading, Lee randomly told Martin she wanted Jodine to move out. There wasn't any sort of fight or disagreement. Lee just suddenly made the decision Jodine had to go. But so far from home, Jodine had nowhere to go. Martin asked why this was happening, and Lee just said, "Because I can." Martin said, "Well, if Jodine goes, then he's going to go." And while John tried to stop them, Lee practically pushed them out the door. Martin and Jodine returned to New Zealand, where Jodine said Martin really went downhill. His drinking increased, and it caused so much strain in their relationship that Martin and Jodine eventually broke up. They kept in touch over the years, and in 2000, Martin called one last time to tell Jodine that he loved her. The following day, Martin took his own life. He was about 37 years old.
Mm.
Interpol managed to track Lee down to inform her of Martin's death. Lee then called Jane to break the news. Jane asked how John was doing, and Lee bluntly said, "John is dead. I never truly loved him." And that's
Wow.
an interesting thing to say about your husband, especially to your child. Um, and just so casually saying he's dead is also interesting because according to the record that Mary West found, John Sabine died in 2001 after Martin.
Mm.
So does this mean that Lee lied to Jane about her father's death, or did Lee somehow know about John's death before it happened? Or did John die earlier than we think?
Right.
Investigators tried to verify John Sabine's death record while also going over all of the evidence from the John Doe case again, hoping to find some sort of clue to help them determine John Doe's identity. The lab painstakingly went over every inch of those 12-foot sheets, searching for fingerprints. And while they briefly believed they had found something, It turned out to be like a weird combination of body fluids mixed with adhesive from the tape. But within the sheets, investigators found a few unknown fibers and a single hair, which did not match the DNA of the victim. It also didn't match any DNA that they had on record. But since Lee was seemingly the only potential suspect at this point, investigators went to the hospital where she was in palliative care and asked for any blood or tissue samples that they may still have from Lee Sabine. Sure enough, they had a few slides that had Lee's DNA. They compared it to that single hair found in the plastic roll, and it came back as a positive match. Police were shocked. Lee didn't fit the profile of a killer, especially since the murder seemed relatively recent, and Lee had been terminally ill and very weak for the past year. So she likely wasn't physically able to commit a murder, but that hair in that package means that Lee was absolutely involved in wrapping that body. So investigators went back through the plastic roll, searching for items that were found within the layers of plastic. Like there was tinfoil, there were plastic bags, and one of those plastic bags was from Tesco, a very popular grocery store in the UK. And when they took a closer look at the Tesco bag, they realized it had a copyright year of 1992. And while plastic bags are meant to be reused multiple times, is it possible in 2015, when they believed the murder happened, that Lee had a 23-year-old plastic bag still kicking around? It's not impossible, it just seems unlikely. Then they examined the pajamas that the victim was wearing. The label stated the brand was St. Michael's, so investigators contacted the department store Marks and Spencer's, who said the St. Michael's brand was discontinued in the late 90s. In fact, the store hadn't stocked the brand since 2000. So now it's starting to seem like the murder wasn't recent at all. Is it possible that the murder took place decades ago and Lee managed to hide it until her death? But how was the body in such good condition? Well, investigators believe that Lee wrapped the body so tightly and was constantly binding it with tape and cords and adding more layers to the point where there was no air inside that roll. They believe she also might have vacuum sealed it for good measure, but she wrapped that body so well that it kept out any air, which kept the body perfectly preserved, making it seem very recent, even though it was several years prior. So now, instead of the victim being dead for a few weeks or a few months, it turns out the victim had been dead for over a decade. But police still didn't know who the victim was. And when they realized that Mary West, Lee's executor who discovered John Sabine's death record, had made a mistake. What she found was a record for John H. Sabine, born in London area in June 1929. Lee's husband was also born in the London area, but he was John C. Sabine, born in August 1930. After comparing the victim's DNA to John's son, they were finally able to determine the victim was, in fact, John Sabine, Lee's husband.
There we go.
Recently, Stephen Sabine said of his father, quote, "My father was a good man, a soft-hearted man. I could never forgive him for what he did, but I still believe he was manipulated and he fell in love with an evil woman. That was his biggest crime." John Sabine was 66 at the time of his death. And while John had signed the tenancy agreement for the Tremacum flat in February 1997, no neighbors remembered seeing him after that. John had an appointment with a local doctor, got a few prescriptions in March 1997, but when his prescription was ready in April 1997, it was never picked up. And no one ever saw John Sabine again. Investigators now believe Lee killed her husband sometime in March or April 1997, which is shocking when the body was still so well preserved in November 2015. So, what the fuck happened, and how was Lee able to hide this for so long? Well, Lee Sabine was born Anne Evans in 1941 in Rhondda Valley, South Wales. For the sake of consistency, I'm just going to keep calling her Lee. So, the woman who put on a fake accent to appear well traveled was literally from a town less than 8 miles from Betha. Her father was a coal miner, and her mother abandoned the family when Lee was just 3 years old.
Hurt people,
Hurt
hurt people.
people. Lee and her younger sister were then shuffled around between various relatives before being sent to a Catholic orphanage and then a foster home. At one of these homes, Lee suffered abuse. No specific details were given. When the father remarried, the girls went back to living at home, but it didn't last very long. In her youth, a family member said of Lee, quote, "There was a nasty streak in her. She was a devil child. She would tell lies, cause trouble, do all sorts of nasty things." When Lee was 15, she was sent to live with an aunt and uncle in London. When Lee turned 16, her aunt, who was an assistant matron at St. Mary's Hospital, encouraged Lee to start nurse training. In 1958, when Lee was 17, she started an affair with a patient, John Sabine.
Aha.
And not only was John 28 at the time, he was also married with 2 young children.
Mm-hmm.
John spent 15 months in the war zone during the Korean War. When a shell blast damaged his hearing, he was granted a discharge. He got married and had 2 children, Caroline and Chris. John's wife learned of his affair. When it was discovered, Lee was pregnant. Again, Lee was 17. John was 28. Yep. John's wife kicked John out. His children were both under the age of 3 at the time.
Ugh.
So yeah, John officially abandoned 7 children in his lifetime, and some of them more than once.
What a gentleman.
Yeah, so I don't know that I could ever praise him the way his son does, but I get he's grasping at straws looking for something
That's something
positive.
else. It's
Yeah.
something else.
Yeah. And you know what? I won't take that from him.
Yeah,
You do what you need to do.
to survive. Yep.
Correct. Yeah.
Yep.
So Lee gave birth to their daughter, Susan, in January 1959. The couple then wasn't free to marry until November 1960. Over the next 4 years, Lee and John had 2 more children, Stephen and Martin. In 1965, they had their 4th child, Jane. Over the years, the family moved from Kent to Hereford to Swansea, and then shortly after Jane was born, they emigrated to New Zealand. In 1967, they had their final child, Leanne. In early 1969, Lee and John abandoned their children to focus on Lee's dreams of becoming a cabaret singer. The problem was she wasn't very good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There were also rumors that the couple chose to leave the country after John was accused of defrauding his accounting firm of $6,000, which is equivalent to around $52,000 in 2025. One of the neighbors claims they saw John burning papers in his backyard before they fled. When Lee and John fled the country, they headed to Australia using the surname Martin. Lee then changed her name from Anne to Lee as she attempted her singing career. She briefly worked at a variety of nightclubs, but honestly, she just didn't have what it takes, and her career fizzled out before it even really started. When they reached out to their children in 1984, Lee and John got a lot of hate from the public. So to try and get positive press and to set the story straight on their point of view, Lee and John agreed to an interview with the Auckland Star newspaper. Lee claimed they only left the children behind because they were broke. and they needed to go somewhere to earn money for their family. Lee said, quote, "We felt cheap, dirty, but we adored our children and wanted to be with them so badly." She claimed that they were so broke that during their 15-year absence, they couldn't even afford to fly home to see their kids. However, in 1972, just 3 years into their disappearance, Lee and John flew back to New Zealand, where they briefly worked as dog breeders, as though they had any previous experience. Um, so they returned to the same country as their children 3 years later, but did not reach out to them for another 12 years. A reminder that she tried to claim that she wanted those children so badly.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. When they finally reunited with the kids, Jane and Leanne demanded answers, and Lee refused to give any. Lee then told reporters that they were going to distance themselves from their daughters because the girls hassled them, which I find fascinating. Because by hassled, she means the girls simply asked for reasons why they'd been abandoned, and Lee refused to give any answers. Um, I assume her mother never gave her answers, so why do her kids get answers? But I mean, I'm not a professional. So, less than a month after being reunited with their kids, Lee and John moved to a new house and did not let their younger daughters know the address. John said, quote, "We just want to get out and start again and try and make the best life we can for our boys and Susan." So now it's in their minds, they've got 3 kids. They just immediately mentally cut out those younger two.
Jesus.
Yeah. Lee added, quote, "If I have to forfeit the 2 girls for the love of the other 3, then so be it."
I don't think anybody's suggesting that other than you, Lee.
Yeah, 100%. Uh, the older 3 siblings were angry with the younger 2 because they wanted a relationship with their parents, and they felt the sisters were making that relationship difficult. Stephen even stated he believed that when the parents were gone, the older 3 had it worse than the younger 2. As he put it, they had it sweet compared to us. I can only assume Stephen at that time was not aware of the intense sexual abuse that his younger sisters suffered while in foster care. In 1984, Lee and John moved to Reading, where they lived with their middle son, Martin, for a few months before Lee kicked him out. While back in the country, John reached out to his first 2 children and tried to reconnect. John's son, Chris, described Lee as aggressive and jealous. It should be noted it was Chris's DNA that was later used to officially identify John's body.
Oh, wow.
In 1992, Lee was fired from her department store job for being flirtatious with customers. So Lee and John moved to Wales and lived in the area where Lee had grown up. According to one of Lee's cousins, after the move, Lee reached out to her extended family asking for money and basically told them, "If I don't get the money, I'm taking my own life."
Wow.
To quote the cousin, "I remember my grandfather saying, 'That's the best thing she could do for everyone.'"
Oh, shit.
Yeah, there's so much there that we don't know.
Yeah.
Um, Lee and John then moved into the Tremacum Flats in February 1997. The few people who met John said he was quiet, seemed to prefer to stick to the background, while Lee was the talkative, social one. About 3 or 4 months after they first moved in, people started asking about John because they hadn't seen him. Lee told them John left her because, as Lee put it, quote, "That's what Italian men do."
Wow.
I didn't even realize he was Italian. I don't think he was, but okay. Lee was known to have a temper, and she and John often fought. When they lived in Reading in the mid 80s with their son Martin, John and Martin got incredibly close, And Lee got jealous of their relationship, which is no surprise that she then pushed Martin out of the house. You may recall that out of nowhere, Lee kicked Martin's girlfriend out, knowing if the girlfriend went, Martin would go with her. It was said that John had an interest in having a relationship with his children, but Lee decided she was over motherhood entirely and she wanted nothing to do with any of them, even John's first two children. Um, After Lee's death, when friends were cleaning out her flat, which I refuse to call apartment, just know, they found a bunch of letters that Lee had written to each of her children. That's how many of them learned she had children in the first place. Um, in the letters, Lee told her children that they were burdens to her. She said that Martin was weak. She called Jane an ugly duckling.
Oh, God.
And specifically in that one to Jane, Lee wrote, again, this was to her daughter, I have served my life sentence of shame and blame. Now it is your turn to suffer the same. Your nemesis, Anne Sabine.
Wow.
Can you imagine having so much hate for your own child? I mean, I would never call myself my children's nemesis. I would also never be so dramatic as to sign a letter, your nemesis, to anyone, even if it was someone that I considered my nemesis. It's just so beyond over the top to me. Um, and also, I'll say it, what a chicken shit to
Mm-hmm.
not just mail them. You waited and made somebody else do it for you. So, based on Lee's very obvious anger and hatred, plus the fact that her hair was found with John's body, police determined that Lee had in fact killed her husband in early 1997. But they wanted to try and they were hoping to find a murder weapon, maybe even narrow down the death a time frame like a little bit more. So they made a public appeal for witnesses to try and determine when John Sabine was last seen. Well, police were contacted by Valerie Chalkley. She had been friends with the Sabines when they first arrived in the UK in 1984. Valerie said Lee was really strange. Um, they lost touch for several years, but in 1997, Lee called Valerie to catch up, just out of the blue. And when Valerie asked about John, Lee said, Oh, I killed him. I hit him over the head with a stone frog because he was getting on my nerves. And while that statement surprised Valerie, she said Lee was always exaggerating, saying ridiculous things. So Valerie just didn't believe her. But then Valerie kind of couldn't stop thinking about it and she started to get concerned. So a few days later, she called Lee back and asked how John was doing. Lee said, Oh, he's all right, just the same. So Valerie thought nothing of it. But you notice how she said he's the same, as though she's like, well, he's still dead.
Yeah, exactly.
Police then contacted Michelle James, ballsy, uh, after what you put that poor woman through.
Yeah.
Um, but they asked if she had anything of Lee's, and she said, yeah, she had a box of stuff from Lee's flat. Inside that box was a stone frog that Lee had used as a doorstop in her bedroom. And when investigators compared that frog to pictures of John's skull, it matched the fracture perfectly. Investigators believe that Lee attacked John in his sleep, wrapped up his body, and when it started to smell, she just simply added another layer of plastic. But by wrapping that body so tightly, she somehow managed to preserve the body for 18 years. But the entire time that Lee referred to the plastic as her medical skeleton, she probably believed that by then the body had decomposed and all that would be left would be a skeleton.
Right.
Which also, you were a fucking nurse. I mean, nurse trainee, so probably you should at least have knowledge of death, but like, sure, it might have just been bones, but where was all the other stuff gonna go? Like they were gonna open it, there was gonna be so many fluids and things. Well, I can't think about it. But in 1998, Lee removed John's name from the tenancy agreement so that she could change it to a single occupancy because then that would make her taxes cheaper. Uh, and since John wasn't listed as dead or even missing, she continued to receive his army pension.
Oh, fantastic.
And in the summer of 2005, when John would have turned 75, Lee transferred John's free TV license to herself. Now, to those who are like, what the hell are you talking about? According to gov.uk, you need a TV license to watch or record live TV on any channel or service or using BBC iPlayer. You do not need a license if you watch streaming services like Netflix or Amazon Prime or anything on YouTube. And apparently, over the age of 75, you're eligible for free or discounted TV licenses. Basically, this is how BBC gets money.
Oh,
Whereas in Canada, I believe government like
right.
gives CBC money,
Yeah.
which is why you just pay for cable. But the license currently costs £174.50, which is about 234 US dollars. That is an annual price that you have to pay. It expires every year, December 31st, regardless as to what time of year you purchase it. But the website says if your TV is black and white, then the license is only £58.50, which is about $78 US. Is anyone still using a black and white TV in 2025? No judgment. I'm fascinated. I just didn't think they existed anymore.
Well, if you want to save money on that TV license, I'd say that's a hack.
Yeah, but watching Eurovision without all the beautiful colors, I can't even begin to imagine.
Of course.
So in August 2014, Lee, who had previously battled breast cancer, suffered a fall at her flat. She was taken to the hospital where a scan revealed that Lee had terminal brain cancer. As soon as she returned home from the hospital, Lee had her carpets professionally cleaned. When her friend Lynn questioned this move, as the carpets were not dirty, Lee was adamant about it. And when the company's machine broke in the middle of the job, Lee demanded they return the next day to finish the job. It almost sounds like someone was trying to hide any potential or microscopic evidence that a murder had taken place there. Near the end of her life, Lee was spending most of her time in palliative care, but one night, after being given permission to return to her flat for a brief amount of time, Lee sat down with friends Michelle James and Lynn Williams and asked them to do her a favor. Lee said there was an old medical skeleton in the shed. She needed it moved to the attic. Lynn said, I hope it's not a bloody real one. Lee responded, You never know. Hmm. Which leads me to my final section, which I'm just going to call lingering questions,
Yes.
because we know the identity of both the victim and the killer, but that doesn't mean I have all the answers that I'm looking for. We know that at some point, Lee kept the body in the garden shed. But where did she keep it before that? Her flat wasn't very big. There wasn't the space under the bed. I have to believe the smell would have permeated at least somewhat. And how did Lee get the body out to the shed on her own in the first place? And if the body was being kept in the shed, who moved it to the area by the wall where it was found? It was said that Lee asked Michelle and Lynn to move it. At one point, she even asked a friend's son to do it. But it's never been publicly stated who actually moved that body in the first place to where it was eventually found. Lee was the only one in that building who cared for the communal garden at the back. At some point, she did a massive overhaul that was so impressive that Lee and the garden were featured in a gardening magazine. So my next question is, why didn't Lee bury the body somewhere in the garden?
Mm,
If she's digging up the garden anyway, it would have been easy to hide the body there. By leaving him in the shed and then asking someone to move him, it made it more likely that the murder would be discovered. So, was that part of it? She wanted it to be found so that she would get the fame that she was so desperately seeking her entire life? The idea that no press is bad press? Did she want to be talked about long after her death because she was scared of being forgotten? Because to that I say, why didn't she ensure her dark legacy by making some sort of deathbed confession?
right.
Because if she was like bad and they knew it was like she had hours or days, I don't think they would arrest her if she confessed.
No.
They would have been like, well, it is what it is. Um, it's just fascinating to me that she didn't outright confess and yet left the body in a place where it would be easily found. Do you want that crime discovered or not? Or is there a possibility that she thought that someone would open that plastic roll, see a skeleton, and go, oh, that's just Lee's fake medical skeleton, and the crime would forever go unnoticed? Unrelated, I also find it fascinating that Lee spent 18 years trying to get sympathy by saying her husband left her for another woman, when the truth is she was the other woman who deserved no sympathy at all. Reporting for True Crime and Cocktails, I'm Christy Oxborrow.
What a wild story. My God. Every week it's like, is there something that could shock me? I don't think so. And then there is. Let's take a quick break, hit the can, grab a drink, and we'll be back to discuss more on the Body Next Door episode of True Crime and Cocktails. All right. Clap three, I guess. On three. One, two, three. Welcome back to this episode of True Crime of Cocktails. We're, of course, discussing The Body Next Door. I may have just said True Crime of Cocktails. I'm on my next high noon, folks, and you're welcome.
I'm
I just want
sober. I almost said sober as a bone. I don't think that's an expression.
sober as a bone.
Yeah, thank you very much. But I
Mhm.
was going to say, I didn't even notice if you did.
Well, you know what? I'm being self-conscious because I'm at that state where I'm not drunk enough to not care. You know what I
Mm,
mean?
of course. Of course.
Too drunk to be articulate, not drunk enough to not care.
Drunk as
Um,
a bone.
Drunk as a bone. Thank you very much.
Of
I
course.
like that the beginning of my notes for this episode include the following: patriarchy, atrocious hats, wretched Lydia, Colin Firth's sex appeal goes up when he uses a walking stick.
Yeah. Oh
Yes.
my God. Yeah. I mean, if I made something where it's, those the shirts that are like this thing and this thing and this thing,
Mhm.
mine would be like atrocious hats, wretched Lydia, insufferable. Do they ever call her Ma? I guess they all just call, maybe they call her Mama. Insufferable Mama, maybe insufferable Mrs. Bennett.
Mama.
And Colin Firth with a walking stick, I think. There's just something so regal about it.
Hmm.
Like he doesn't need it, but like he has enough money that it's like you have money when you're using a walking stick, but you don't need to use a walking stick.
Of course.
This revelation about you're rich if you have a walking stick um shocks me about as much as my love of horses, apparently.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I get that. I get that. Um, all right. This story is absolutely bonkers.
Yeah.
Absolutely bonkers. Uh, riveting. I think, you know, I'm fascinated by Lee
Mm.
from a psychologist hat perspective because the little details, like, her being the reason why they abandoned the children, her being the one who would get super jealous if one of the children connected with their father, Her being the one telling her daughter Jane, "Oh, John's dead and I never really loved him." The fact that I believe there was a ripped up photo of Derek Ellis in her apartment, right? And it said,
Yep.
"The only man I truly loved."
Yeah.
This woman is an enigma. And I'm just going to say right from the get, I am in no way defending any of her actions whatsoever. They're undefendable.
Of
I,
course.
at the same time, think that she's fascinating because there's so much happening here from a psychology level that, and that's, of course, if you've ever listened to the show before, you know that that's one of my biggest fascinations.
Of
So
course.
here's what I'm going to say. The fact that her mother left her when she was a young child, and then she did the same thing as an adult is obviously it's not a hot take. It's not, it doesn't take anyone with any knowledge to go, probably a connection there.
Yeah.
Um, Here's the thing I will say though, because I think, and I want to again say, this is not me defending her, but I think what's very sad to me is I think she was so scarred by the experience of her mother leaving her as a young child
Yep.
that subconsciously she became absolutely terrified of anyone ever leaving her. And the way that she then chose to combat that was I have to leave them first. I have to not care. I have to say that they're a burden. I have to say I don't love them. I have to say they never mattered. I have to say these other things are more important. I think the reality of, and we've talked about attachment theory on the show, I think a little bit before, but like the reality of someone like that, in my opinion, and this is not, I'm not an expert, but is that it's such a deep fear of getting close because if you get really close to someone, then they can really hurt you.
Of course.
I think that that's, you know, ultimately the story of so much of a part of her story. Now, what that doesn't account for is the murder. So I will go so far as to say I think there's a very large part of her psyche that was deeply impacted by her mother abandoning her, and I think that it caused all of these, overreactions and attachment issues, etc. I'm absolutely not suggesting that people with those kinds of attachment traits would then murder. Not at all.
Of
Two separate
course.
things. So I think it's interesting to me that she was casual about it. It's interesting to me that she used a stone frog, which she then kept in her apartment.
Yeah.
That speaks to state of mind. Um, the fact that we have no idea where she was keeping this body. And it appears that it's like, again, she kept wrapping it so tightly with more plastic that it preserved it, which again is like such a fascinating part of this whole thing. Like she kind of not mummified it because I know that that is a different thing, but it's that same concept where it's, well, she essentially put it in and put him, and I'm not being glib, she put him in a giant zippy. And again, if you keep
Yeah.
putting 41 zippies thick, whatever's in the center there is probably going to preserve, right? Because it's like, or it's going to reach a point of, it's going to slow the
Okay.
disintegration process, right?
Yeah.
Um, where did she keep it? How did she get it to the shed? These are great questions. Uh, it's never been made public who moved the body. The fact that, okay, because from the very beginning of this episode, when you were like, oh, this girl Michelle was saying to her friend, hey, wouldn't it be a laugh? Hold on. Wouldn't it be a laugh? Um, don't come for me. I've been drinking. Okay? Don't know. Sod off, you
Oh,
lunchbox.
now you're getting
You
a little
plum.
young blood.
Well, listen, that's a joy. That's a dream. Um, it's Essex. It's the only way is Essex. And for me, the thing about that reality show was just the insults, like calling people lunchboxes, calling people plums. You plum, your lunchbox. Never gets old for me. Anyway, the fact that Michelle was like, "Hey, friend, wouldn't it be funny because I have access to this medical skeleton? Wouldn't it be funny if we used it to prank somebody?" Here's the thing: if I came over to your house and you were
Yeah.
like, "Hey, Lauren, I have access to a medical skeleton. Should we prank somebody?" I'd say, to your husband and children, excuse us, we're gonna be going away for at least 48 to 72 hours because something's up.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know, like, am I nuts? Like, I just feel like it's like, if any one of my friends was like, "I've got a great idea. I have access to a medical skeleton. Let's use it to prank somebody." My first response would always be, "You okay?"
I mean, yes. Um, eh, eh, they kind of made it seem like pranks were, like, her thing,
Okay.
but I'm also just like, how did you know like, there's also something I'm confused about how long she knew that it was sitting there, but I'm also like, the neighbor upstairs is an older man, and you thought, "Let's scare him. That'll be funny." I think that's
Well,
dicey. And then there was also a moment where they considered, like, just putting the skeleton, like, on a couch and inviting someone over to scare them, and I'm just like, "Yeah, I don't know." I'm
well,
just not good with pranks. I don't wanna be the victim of one. I don't wanna be the partaker of one. I don't think
I
that's right.
I hear you. But here's where I was getting. Here's what I was getting
It's
at.
the skeleton for you specifically involved in the prank.
No, no, I'm pivoting. My first point was, if anybody said that to me, I'd be like, "Are you all right? Have you lost your mind?"
Yeah.
And because of that, go with me. She knew where the body was.
Yeah.
She was the one who opened the plastic and then called the police.
Yeah.
I don't know that Lady Jane was completely unknowing of what was in that plastic.
Mm.
I'm not saying she obviously killed him. We know pretty definitively that's not true. But how did the body get down to the shed? How did she know where the body was exactly? Because she did. Why was she so keen on using the body? We found out later that we know Lee sat Michelle down with her other friend and said, when she was in palliative care, right? She had gotten
Yeah.
let out and went back to the apartment. She had this meeting with Michelle and her other friend, whose name I can't see.
Lynn.
Um, Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And said, "This is what I need you to do." Right?
Yeah.
All I'm saying is it possible that Michelle knew what was in that plastic, knew that it was a body? Because, by the way, like, if I was to believe this person's claim that it's like, "Oh, I have a medical skeleton wrapped in 41 layers of plastic,"
Hmm. Sure.
what would I just, I don't know that I would assume that. So again, it's like the fact that she was like, "Hey, I know where there's this skeleton. It's wrapped in all of this plastic for some unknown reason. Let's go open it up." My question is, did she know what was up? She helped move it and then went, "Oh my God, I feel incredibly guilty. I have to do something so that this is caught."
Interesting.
Because I don't know her. I don't know anything about her. I'm making complete speculations here, obviously, but it just feels unlikely to me. Like, again, like, I don't know, I have questions about, like, the weight of it,
Oh, sure.
right? A medical skeleton, I'm not saying it's going to be light, but it's going to be a lot lighter than a preserved body,
100%. I
and
also
she
immediately am like, a nurse just keeping that?
I feel like those, and again, I'm speculating, don't come for me, I'm not, don't charge me with defamation, but I just feel like those 2 had to have known. How else would the skeleton have gotten moved? There's no way on God's green earth that Lee, as a terminally ill woman, is going to be able to move that body by herself. I don't buy that. So I think she turned to these friends and were like, "Hey, I killed my husband. I've hidden it all these years. I've said it was this medical skeleton. I
Sure.
need you to do something with it."
I mean, it's possible.
Right?
Oh, 100%. It's possible that it was like, but please wait till I'm dead.
Right.
But because again, I I don't know how strong she was in 1997, but I just don't know how she would have moved the body outside to begin with, and how'd she do it so nobody noticed?
Well, was this Derek character involved? What's that timeline?
Interesting.
Right?
Huh.
I mean, listen, you said that that John was 5'6", so he wasn't a massive guy, but
Sure.
he would still have been, again, I'm picking numbers, but if he's average, he would still be what, like 150 pounds, 160 pounds,
Oh, I think at
likely?
minimum, yeah.
Yeah, that's not easy to move. The idea
Oh,
also,
yeah.
like, the idea that and when a body becomes dead weight, I don't need to explain to anybody listening to this show, like, it's even harder. Like, it's harder to pick up a person that's the same size as you potentially, or bigger. I mean, again, I don't know how big or small she was, but I guess what I'm saying is the idea that she was just living in that flat with that body for 18 years is chilling.
Yep.
Feels
Yeah.
again like, is that possible? How would that work? Again, how, and then it's like, how did she get access to all of this? I guess, I mean, I understand you can buy tarps, you can buy big pieces of plastic, of course. I'm not saying that
Sure.
that's not possible. But what did it look like to put another layer on? Again, I'm not being glib here. What did it look like? Put down this giant piece of plastic on the floor and then lug out this very heavy body and then roll it and then somehow move it again?
Great call. How long from the moment she killed him to the last layer of plastic went on? What's
Exactly.
that length of time like?
That's my question. Because part of me thinks it's more realistic to believe she did them all at once. That she killed him and then she wrapped
Mm,
him and wrapped him and wrapped him and wrapped him in the moment.
sure.
I think logistically speaking, that would be easier to pull off
Oh, I
than
think so too.
periodically just adding another layer, adding another layer, adding another layer. Because again, it's like you're moving the body every time, you're manipulating the body every time.
Yeah.
And I also, not to be disgusting, but like as you said at the beginning, when they started to cut open the plastic, it was like a liquid in there, right? Like,
Right.
not, I don't know, like, not something to me that there's just such a level of risk if you're keeping a partially wrapped body in your place of residence.
Yes.
I think the more you manipulate it, the more you move it, the more all of these things, like, the more of a chance there is that it's going to go awry, that it's going to unravel, literally and metaphorically.
100%. I also want to know if they assume because he was in his pajamas that he
Right.
was murdered when he was sleeping. Where's the mattress?
Now you're talking.
Because there's no chance that she's like, nobody would notice a massive amount of blood. If you fracture a skull while he's in bed, someone's going to
Right.
notice. Or did she somehow manage to make the mattress look clean enough that from when you looked at it closely or from far away, you're like, eek, that could just be other bodily fluids. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. It's a great question. Because
I
then
just want to
also,
know how she got that body out of that apartment. Ah, fuck. I hate that I called it an apartment.
sorry, yes, the
It's
flat.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't know. Like, to me, again, it's not me coming from Michelle because obviously she had a terrible run of everything that happened to her, which is not fun at all. It just feels suspect to me that we are we know that Lee had basically said, "Hey, I have this thing. Can you deal with it for me or whatever. And then she was like, "Hey, let's use this medical skeleton I have access to." Like if someone had a medical skeleton, here's the last thing I'm going to say. If someone had a medical skeleton,
Yeah,
not that I've seen a lot of stored medical skeletons in my life, but I've seen some on sets for TV shows and
of
movies and everything.
course.
It's not something you need to keep in a lot of plastic. It's you can dust it. Like it is what it is. It's just hanging there,
Right.
right? Um so the idea that it would be wrapped in so much plastic anyway would already be weird because to me it's like maybe you put like one layer over it, but like I don't think you'd be encasing it in like 41 layers of plastic. Let's get honest here. Like this is going to be very large, very thick. This is and by the way, it's not a skeleton. There's flesh, there's muscle,
Mhm.
right? So it's going to be even bigger. If you think about the size of my body, for example, and then you put all of those layers around it, like it's starting to get I mean, this is bigger
Yeah.
than bigger this is the diameter of this could be bigger than like a rolled up carpet. Like this could be very, very thick, for lack of a better term. And I
Oh,
guess
yeah.
right? And so I guess for me, it's just like breaking down that it's like, Michelle, did you really believe that that's what was in there? I don't buy that.
It's tough because it's is that yeah, is that what she thought? I mean, I'm trying to the picture will be on the case file, but that's kind of the idea.
Oh my God. Right.
Like, and again, it's just, I mean,
Good Lord.
it's a lot of plastic. It's just, I can't believe she got away with it
Yeah.
for as long as she did. Also, did no one find it weird that you're like, I'm going to buy 14 massive tarps?
I guess my question is what does get you on a police list? What gets you on a watch list? I mean, I know if you're buying like other combinations of things, it could. But yeah, is tarps not one of them?
It's also shocking to me that it's like, I guess it worked out in her favor to push away all the children because if she hadn't, they would have been like, seriously, where is he?
Right. Great point. So was this a longer term plan potentially?
I'm also just wondering the fact that she called that friend out of the blue and was like, "Oh, yeah, he's dead. I killed him." It's like, were you calling because you wanted to get it off your chest? And you knew that if you spoke to her about it, she'd just be like, Lee exaggerates. She's quirky,
Probably.
which is insane. So it's like she walked a fine line of wanted to get caught, but also didn't want to suffer any consequences.
Right.
Again,
Yeah,
I
I mean,
just how many people could do wrap a body like that and have it preserve almost perfectly
very few.
to the
And it's
point
not
where they find the body and they're like, "Shit, this
and
is
it's
new."
important to remember too that she did this in the 90s. It's not like now where we have the internet and we can Google anything. Not that
Right?
I'm suggesting anybody do that, but like it would have just been by instinct slash fluke that she was able to pull that
Yeah.
off that well. Like there's no for the young people listening, there was no encyclopedia in the 90s where you could look up like how to make sure a body doesn't
Yeah.
get caught, get found. Like it's like there was no way for her to know. It would have literally have to have been again luck or, you know, well, kind of luck. I think luck
Yeah.
either way. Luck either way that she managed to do that way.
I don't
And that it
think
was
her
so
intention
sealed.
Yeah, I don't think her intention was to, like, preserve it. I think
Right.
she just wanted to keep everything inside.
Well, but in that case, last psychologist hat moment. If we are to believe that that body was kept in her place, let's just say it was for the sake of this thought,
Sure.
it does, one could say, potentially fit into the same mindset that she's afraid to get close to people because they'll leave her, right?
Sure.
So this is a way for her to ensure that someone never leaves her.
Interesting. I also just think at least one, I was going to say gentleman friend, but no, fuck that. We're going to be the generation that gets rid of an older woman having a partner being a friend, gentleman friend. We're getting rid of that. We're taking it out. When her boyfriend moved in, where was the body? Because there's no way somebody else is going to live in that flat that was not very big and not be like, what is that horrific smell? I just can't believe even through that many layers, there was no scent.
I mean, 41 layers is pretty thick.
True.
If
I'm
you
just
take
like
a
the smell of a body.
I'm not negating it, and I don't wanna in any way investigate or, try and figure out by experiment if it's true, but, like, if you think about picking up dog poop, we're bringing it back there, and doing it in a plastic bag, like, automatically, it dissipates so significantly when you knot up that bag. So then if you put that bag in
Sure.
41 more bags, I don't know. I don't know what the science is there. I agree with you that it does feel like it's like, wouldn't there be still a smell? But would there? If she managed to pull it off and really seal it up, if every layer, every one of the 41 layers was like really sealed.
Yeah. God, I'm also like, my God, when her boyfriend moved in, is there a possibility that she was like, "Hey, here's this old," maybe she's told him it was a medical skeleton. Maybe she was like, "This is an old rug or something. Can you move this down to the shed for me?"
100%. That was going to be the next thing I said.
And he, of course, had no idea. Fascinating.
Listen, no matter how you slice it, Lee is a fascinating human.
Well, I have so many questions that I'll just never get answers for, but I'm just fascinated that it was in her home was a massive photo of herself from her cabaret days, which I'll remind you weren't successful. She also told people she was a supermodel. She was not.
Right.
I'm also
Delusions.
fascinated about their time as dog breeders,
Mm,
but I don't want to know too much.
mm-mm. Yeah, delusions, grandiose sense of self, like these are all textbook narcissism, personality disorders, you know. True narcissism, remember, is rooted in a deep self-hatred. So if
Mm,
she was to believe to the core of her being that she was so terrible her mother left her when she was 3, I could see that developing all of those kinds of traits.
yeah, that makes
And how
sense.
tragic. Ultimately so sad. So sad for those children. Um, that they ended up in the system and were being abused and mistreated. Like, just, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy all around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, Christy Oxborrow, fantastic work as always. Appreciate you always bringing us the compelling stories. 12 out of 10. Couldn't be better.
You know, I like the praise.
I do. And we thank you, dear listeners, for joining us for this wild ride. If you haven't already, give us a follow on the socials on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at True Crime and Cocktails. If you'd like some bonus subscription, wow, some bonus content, go over to patreon.com/True Crime and Cocktails to learn more about our subscription-based service over there. And of course, the only place for official True Crime and Cocktails merch is, of course, truecrewmerch.com. So check that out as well if you're interested. Christy, do you want to tell the people about next week's episode?
On the next True Crime and Cocktails, the milkshake murder.
My milkshake brings all the boys to the yard, then I murder them?
I mean, what are the boys even doing in that yard? Are they going to clean it up? Are they going to do anything, or do they just stand there and stare at you?
I guess we'll find out next week. Um, Christy, do you want to say goodnight to the people?
Oh, good night to the horses.
Good night, Colin Firth.